Hey everybody, Joe LoRusso here, Director of Aviation at Ramos Law, with all the comments from 10 Kilo Juliet. This is impressive. There are so many comments here. There's so many questions. There's so much interaction, and that's exactly why we wanted to do this channel, is to be able to have that open line of communication with the industry to try and answer some of these questions and try to address some of these issues and crash investigations from both a piloting side and a legal side. So as promised, we read them. We try and interact with them. If there's a lot of them like there was on that video, we'll try and do follow-up videos where we address these questions and comments to make sure that you're heard. Now, number one, a lot of you have been heard about the music. I'm so sorry if that detracted from the video at all. Please know that is heard, and we will correct that in all future videos. There will not be any music. I'm sorry if that detracted from the evaluation of this crash, but thank you very much for letting us know. All right, let's run through some of these questions, and I'll see if I can answer anything that pops up here. So here's a question. Would the takeoff be successful if the pilot had rotated at 15 knots higher than what the book says? No, unfortunately not. So a contaminated wing like that, the Challenger 650 is so contamination critical. And a lot of swept wing jets are, that when it's ice, and your laminar flow is essentially ruined. So no, it would have crashed faster. And that is often, that's a great question because a lot of people think that I'll just rotate faster to get through ice. Really, the issue is not with speed, it's with contamination on a swept wing aircraft. So great question. This question is, Allegiant Air taxi back to the icing apron after failing a tactile check before departure. Did ground share this information with 10 Kilo Juliet? Great question. I don't believe ground shared it, but here's kind of, and there's a lot of questions around this issue of wouldn't 10 Kilo Juliet have been listening to the de-ice crew? Wouldn't they have been on a different radio frequency than ground, and they wouldn't have heard the interaction between Moxie, Tower, and Allegiant? Now, with a lot of operators, Part 91 and 135, myself included, on all the operations that I'm involved when there's two pilot airplane, two pilots up front for the jet. Generally, while de-icing, in most of the jets that I fly, we de-ice a lot, just being from the region that we're from. When you're de-icing, one pilot is talking to the de-ice crew and on that frequency, the other pilot is usually on ground. And the reason for that is because you have to be conscious of your holdover times. And if, for example, ground decides to close a taxiway for plowing operations, or close a taxiway because of a disabled aircraft, or a truck gets stuck or something like that, you need to be able to hear that so that you can communicate that with de-ice. Now, obviously, tower ops and ground will also communicate with de-ice, but it's kind of a, essay for everybody, right? Situational awareness for the entire operation. So in all the operations that we do, somebody is always on ground, and then they're always coordinating with ground saying, hey, we're almost done. We're getting our final application right now. Here's our holdover time. We need to be quick to the runway. As soon as this truck pulls, make sure that we're clear to go. And ground usually says, okay, we got you. So no, I didn't hear ground communicate any of what Allegiant and Moxie said, but I also don't know that 10 Kilo Juliet wasn't listening to that interaction. What do you Maine EX have to say about this, referring to people in Maine? A lot of comments about how I pronounce banger. I said banger instead of bang-or, so Bangor, Maine, so I apologize for that. Didn't mean to offend anybody on that one. Thank you for correcting me. This one says, this is just a simple comment that says, ambulance chaser, these people aren't even buried yet and you're trying to make a buck off of them. I'm not. This is simply a video where we investigate. In our industry, I can tell you, as a professional pilot who eats, sleeps, breathes, and lives this industry through and through, knowledge is power. And I can tell you, the moment that this accident happened, I was getting pinged from everybody, all my buddies flying, saying, Joe, did you hear about this? What do you think? Joe, did you hear about this one? What do you think? And eventually it just came to the point of, you know what? All of us talking about this, having the same conversation about what I think and what they think, and with this person and this person and this person, knowledge is power. We need to share it across the industry so that the next crew doesn't get into a situation like that. Assuming it was an icing and a holdover issue, the goal is to make an accident not happen in vain, right? For the rest of the industry to learn from it. So that's the goal of these videos, and I certainly hope that it's helpful to any operators out there. Why the tech stop at BGR with the weather being bad? And this is a reference to Gander Goose, St. John's. Those are all options. I agree. Certainly some aeronautical decision-making into play, right? We always talk about CRM. We always talk about ops on the ground. Too often we don't talk about ADM, right? The aeronautical decision-making before you even take off. When you're sitting in Houston saying, all right, we're going to tech stop in Maine, and then we're jumping the pond. Is that tech stop viable? What's the weather look like there? Should we do an alternate tech stop? Now, granted, if you're going to Goose, that's generally where I go out of, is Goose or St. John's. If you're going through there, you have to get CAM pass involved because you are crossing from the United States to Canada. So you have to get their immigration involved, but CanPass is very easy to do. They're a great entity to work with, and they're very easy. They know that they're tech stops at Goose and St. John, so they really try hard to make it easy for U.S. operators to use it. So great question, great comment. Yeah, certainly something to consider. Where will the Canadian agencies fit into the investigation? Now, obviously, this crash happened in the U.S., not in Canada, so I assume this is in reference to Bombardier, with the Challenger 650 being a Bombardier project. So the NTSB will generally share information to other agencies if they request it, but all the agencies fall under ICAO, and ICAO says that whatever nation the crash happened in, that nation's investigative body is primary and principal. So anything the NTSB wants to share with Canada, they certainly can, but generally that'll just stay within the NTSB, and then the Canadian entities can request information back and forth if they think it'll be beneficial to their country's safety. What does it mean to handle crash cases? I guess I said that in my introduction. Do you investigate them? Do you bring tort cases? Do you fend tort cases? Great question. To handle them, we do an investigation. We're plaintiffs' attorneys, so we generally represent injured parties in crashes, or unfortunately, most commonly, we represent their families and the estates because they passed away in an aircraft crash. And in doing so, and being able to bring those cases, to bring a tort claim in whatever state it may be, we do have to investigate the wrecks. As I talked about in the previous case, the NTSB report, the final report that has the causation according to the NTSB, holds no evidentiary value. I can't bring that report into court. I can't set it on the table all dramatically in front of the jury and say, here you go, black and white, dispositive, they're at fault. I can't do that. I can't put an NTSB investigator on the stand, I can't depose them, and I can't introduce their report as causative evidence. So I have to run my own investigation. We have to have a team ready to run a side-by-side parallel investigation with the NTSB, and consider, in my previous video, I talked about the fact that there are many crashes that the NTSB doesn't show up on. So in that case, we're almost principal in our investigation of what happened simply because they're not there. So yes, we investigate them. Yes, we bring tort cases civilly on behalf of the plaintiffs, and we do it nationwide. This one just says, a quote from me that says, so they were likely within a couple thousand feet of their max takeoff weight. Sorry. That's my brain, working too fast or faster than my mouth. So they were a couple thousand pounds of their max takeoff weight. So good catch. Appreciate that. You guys listen very tightly. Isn't there Type 4 de-ice trucks stationed just outside the ramp to spray every departing airplane, whether they ask for it or not? Absolutely not. De-icing is requested, and that's it. They do not spray every airplane that comes through. An operator must request icing, and they have to specify which type they want. 10 kilo Juliet requested, 2, Type 1, Type 4. That has to be requested. That is not on the airport. They do not take it upon themselves to de-ice airplanes. This one says, does anybody find this lawyer's assessment to be a bit smarmy? I don't know how to pronounce that. S-M-A-R-M-Y, smarmy? I mean, the NTSB hasn't even been there yet, and he's blabbing on with conjecture rather than facts. So this is an interesting one. In my world, in the legal world, and in the piloting world, we have to do this. We have to look at every wreck, and we have to do an investigation on our own because we cannot use the NTSB's findings in their final report. So no, I don't sit there and wait for the NTSB, and in many cases, we don't have the same budget as the NTSB, and we don't have the same staffing concerns as the NTSB. So in many cases, we're able to do more tests on the aircraft once released from the NTSB with more professionals and experts involved in that investigation. So I appreciate saying, I'm diving into this before the NTSB, but please understand that I don't wait for the NTSB. I can't wait for the NTSB. I respect them. I appreciate what they do. They're hardworking men and women, but we have to do our own thing in this industry, unfortunately. Skip the camera B. We'll think about it. If we get a lot of comments about that, we certainly will shift the camera. Why did the tower release them if it was snowing ice pellets? Couldn't the weather have been different at the tower versus the other end of the runway? So tower will always release. The decision to go, unless the airport is closed, unless we're talking about an airport that's NOTAM closed, we got a disabled aircraft on the runway, we got something blocking the runway, and tower goes, no. A decision to take off is on that aircraft. So if the aircraft requests takeoff and there's nothing facility-wise that's preventing that takeoff, tower will release them. As long as there's an agency willing to pick them up, a TRACON, a center, or something like that, they can release them to somebody. they'll release them. So unfortunately, that decision was not on the tower. That decision was on the flight crew. Doesn't a Challenger have onboard de-ice systems? Yes. So a lot of these jets have de-ice, and a lot of these jets have anti-ice. And there's a difference between de-ice and anti-ice. Anti-ice is obviously preventative, right? You turn it on before you go into known conditions, right? You're heating up your surfaces. You have de-ice where, like a boot, right? Some aircraft have pneumatic boots that'll pop the ice off and you can cycle the boots. Most of these jets, if you're de-icing, if your contamination on the ground is so bad, the AFMs will require either de-icing or just don't go. And when you have the de-ice fluid on, most of the AFMs for these jets, and I believe the Challenger 650 is included in this, that you're not allowed to take off with your wing heat on while you're rolling with de-ice. So as soon as you get in the air, then you crank on your ice. So unfortunately, the aircraft systems alone in situations like this, when you fail a tactile check, is not sufficient enough to clear the ice and to safely depart. Need to have the fluid on board. You can't, quote, dive in and investigate this crash, unquote. All you have is circumstantial evidence. You don't have the FDR or CVR, so you don't know what caused the crash. Okay, so a couple things to dive into on this. So CVR is a cockpit voice recorder. A lot of jets do not have that. It's based on parts and seats and weights. This jet, the 650, did meet it, so it would have a CVR on board. Now, the cockpit voice recorder is going to record the conversation in the cockpit. What was discussed. This one would be a great one for a CVR, right? Because you're hearing the crew talk about the de-icing and getting to the runway and any stressors they may have had. Now, there's plenty of wrecks that we investigate where the CVR is, one, either destroyed or just not, it didn't capture things in the cockpit that we needed to hear at that time. There were other noises going on or something like that. So CVR is great when we have it, but not reliable. The FDR, the flight data recorder, some jets don't have a flight data recorder required in Part 121 operations. Again, sometimes destroyed. Of course, that's your traditional black box, right? In the 121 operation, supposed to survive anything. Any NTSB investigator will tell you that's hit and miss on what that records. A lot of times in our world, in the Part 91 world and the Part 135 world, we're having to piece together an FDR based off of different avionics. So for example, if you're taking like a King Air and a King Air is running like G3s, a 650, 750 stack, in those cases, you're pulling out independent data cards out of all those products, right, to build a comprehensive FDR. So appreciate that. I don't have the FDR, I don't have the CVR. All we have is circumstantial evidence. We do. But that circumstantial evidence is good in this case. We know the facts. We certainly don't want to be in a position where we're just speculating and throwing out wild accusations. That's not what we're here for. As both a pilot and an attorney, that's not what I'm here for. As a pilot, I want that information to be as educated of a guess as I possibly can so that this doesn't happen to me or any of my friends or any other operators that I know, right? Same thing on the lawyer side, right? We have to evaluate this using our best educational guess with the evidence that's available and the facts that's available at that time so that we can narrow our investigation and properly build up this investigation in the time that we have to do so within the statute of limitations. So circumstantial evidence, sure. Also facts, yeah. We 100% have facts that we can go on to make an educated guess in the preliminary hours. That's not to say that what we say now is not going to be the final, right? We can evolve that as more facts come in. If we get an FDR, if we get a CVR, if we get all that data in, that's the beauty of this process is we get to evolve our investigation, constantly ruling out what didn't happen and focusing on what likely did. Unfortunately, we're never going to know exactly because we weren't on board. That's gone. Right? The best we can do is get all the evidence that we can as it's made available to get a reasonable conclusion as to what happened here. So a big thank you to everybody that commented, that subscribed, that watched the video. I really, really enjoy this interaction from both a pilot side and an attorney side. I love being able to work through incidents like these as a community to make sure that we figure out what happened, to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again, so that the casualties, the fatalities were not in vain. So thank you very much from the bottom of my heart on behalf of Ramos Law, Aviation, everybody here that works on these cases nationwide. Thank you for the interaction. Look forward to these videos and I look forward to interacting with all of you in the future.